It was December 13th, 2003, a night buried in whispers and dust. Somewhere near the small town of Adar, just south of Tikrit, U.S. soldiers moved under the cloak of silence. The moon hid behind clouds, as if refusing to witness what was about to unfold. Beneath the earth, beneath the ruins of a farmhouse, a man who once ruled millions sat alone, breathing the stale air of fear. His name was Saddam Hussein. They called it Operation Red Dawn, a name drawn from an old American film about resistance, poetic, ironic. For the man they hunted had once seen himself as the ultimate resistor, the last lion of the Arab world. But tonight, his roars were gone. Only echoes remained, deep inside a narrow hole carved into the dirt, his last refuge, his last secret place. When the soldiers lifted the metal lid and pointed their rifles downward, time froze. The light fell upon a face, aged, tired, and coated in soil. His beard, now streaked with gray, his eyes sunken but still burning with the ghost of pride. The once iron ruler of Iraq was no longer on a throne. He was sitting in the mud, but before this final moment of capture, before the shame, before the silence, there was a story. A story that began with belief, turned to madness, and ended in betrayal. To understand Saddam's last secret place, we must return to the beginning, to the world that built him. The year was 1937. In a small village called Al-Auja, a boy was born into nothingness. His father vanished before he could remember his name, his stepfather beat him, and his mother's love came in whispers, not warmth. Poverty wrapped around him like chains, and from that emptiness, a single fire grew. Power. They say a man born in the dust learns to either crawl or conquer. Saddam chose to conquer. He walked barefoot through the burning sands to Tikrit, dreaming of palaces. To others they were mirages. To him they were blueprints. The boy who once watched soldiers march by with envy would one day command entire armies. But not through kindness, through fear. Fear became his language, loyalty, his illusion. In his early years with the Ba'ath Party, Saddam learned the art of shadows, betrayal dressed as brotherhood, murder hidden behind ideology. He was young, hungry, and ruthless. He didn't follow leaders, he studied how to replace them. When he met Ahmad Hassan al-Bakr, Iraq's then president, Saddam found his first mentor, and his first ladder to power. While others bowed, Saddam watched. While others hesitated, he struck. By 1979, that ladder reached its final rung. In a hall filled with party members, Saddam lit a cigarette and read a list of traitors. One by one, men who had once shared his dream were dragged away, shot, or vanished into oblivion. It was that day the Arab world learned his true face. Not just a leader, a ruler sculpted by paranoia. Soft music rises, strings. But behind the iron mask there was still the boy from Tikrit, the one who wanted to prove to the world that Iraq could rise from dust to destiny. He built palaces like empires, bridges, statues, monuments, all bearing his image. He wrote poems, recorded songs, even appeared in novels as the hero of his own mythology. Yet every myth demands a price. His wars began as symbols of pride but ended as graves of millions. The Iran-Iraq War, 8 years of blood and sorrow. The invasion of Kuwait, a decision that shattered his empire and summoned the wrath of the world. Explosion echoes in the distance. By 1991, Iraq was burning. His cities lay in ruins, his people starved under sanctions. Yet Saddam still stood on balconies waving to crowds that cheered out of fear, not faith. That's the thing about absolute power. It doesn't end with truth. It ends with illusion. Low hum, static sound. Through the 1990s, while the world saw him as a monster, Saddam saw himself as destiny's chosen son. He built secret bunkers under palaces, tunnels between cities, and even hidden vaults filled with gold, art, and documents of his rule. But among those secrets, one bunker, one particular hiding place, was unlike the others. Rumor said he ordered it to be built not for war, but for resurrection. a place where the fallen lion could wait until the dust of history settled, until his name was no longer cursed. It was small, silent, and buried deep in the earth near his birthplace, Tikrit, his last fortress of memory, soft wind blowing again. When the American forces invaded Iraq in 2003, Saddam vanished. Like smoke in the wind, he disappeared into his own legend. Some thought he fled to Syria, others believed he was dead. But he was neither. He was waiting, in that secret hole, surrounded by the ghosts of his empire. He carried only a gun, a few $100s, and a Quran. He told the men who still guarded him that he was writing his final thoughts, his confession to the world, but those pages were never found. As months passed, Iraq spiraled into chaos. Baghdad fell, statues crumbled. His sons, Uday and Qusay, were hunted and killed, their bodies displayed for the world to see. Radio static, echo of distant weeping. The man who once ruled with unshakable power was now reduced to whispers in the night, a fugitive sleeping under dirt. And yet, even in his darkest hours, his belief didn't break. He told his remaining guards, "History will remember me differently." Heartbeat fades. But history had already written its verdict. Soft rain begins. December 2003. American forces closed in on Tikrit. They followed a network of informants tracing the web of Saddam's loyalists until they reached the farmhouse. It looked ordinary, a few trees, a dirt road, and silence. Beneath it, they found a narrow opening sealed by a piece of metal. When they lifted it, a light shone into the dark. And there he was. Not the lion, not the president, not the dictator. Just a man, blinking at the blinding truth of his own downfall. His hands trembled. The soldiers shouted. He raised his hands. It was over. Long silence. But what happened next? What Saddam said, what he revealed in those final interrogations, would uncover a side of him the world never truly knew. A side hidden in that secret place. Because what he buried beneath that earth wasn't just himself. It was something else. Something the world wasn't ready to find. Thunder rumbles, wind rises. To understand that, we must go deeper. Soft wind, faint echo of dripping water. Deep beneath the dust of Tikrit, the air was thick with stillness. The soldiers had taken him, but the echoes of his last words before capture lingered, carried by those who had stood guard until the very end. Words they barely understood. Words that hinted at something buried, not just a man but a memory, a truth, or perhaps a curse. Footsteps on concrete. When American intelligence began interrogating Saddam Hussein, they expected rage, defiance, arrogance. What they found instead was unsettling calm. He spoke not like a prisoner, but like a man fulfilling prophecy. He called his capture a test of patience, and his trial a rehearsal for history. He would say strange things. "You think you found me, but you haven't found what I left behind." Those who questioned him thought it was arrogance. But among the old Iraqi officers still loyal to him, it was taken as code. Something was hidden. Something only he knew. Low hum of tension. They searched the palaces, the tunnels, the bunkers. They found gold, cash, documents, but not that. Not what Saddam hinted at. Then one day during an interrogation he asked for a pen and paper. And for hours he wrote, quietly, methodically, without saying a word. When the guards looked at what he wrote, it wasn't a confession. It was a story. Slow music fades in. Oud strings. He began with his childhood again. The riverbanks of Tikrit, the smell of gunpowder in the air, the sound of boots on gravel. He wrote about his mother, Sabha Tulfa, her pain, her anger, and her belief that her son was born for greatness. She spoke of destiny, he wrote, as if it were a birthmark. He wrote of betrayal, of cousins who mocked him, of teachers who humiliated him, of soldiers who doubted his worth, and how each humiliation carved into him a new kind of ambition, cold and unstoppable. Then came the rise, his secret alliances. His first assassination attempt. The exile to Cairo, where he learned politics not from books, but from the streets. Where power wasn't earned, it was taken. And finally, he wrote of the day he returned to Iraq. When I crossed the border, he wrote, I buried the boy named Saddam. Only the name remained. Desert wind, faint gunfire echoes. As the pages continued, his writing darkened. He spoke of his wars, but not as strategy, as judgment. The world thinks I loved war, he wrote. They are wrong. I loved the silence that follows victory. That silence is the only time a ruler hears himself. He wrote about the Iran-Iraq War, how he believed he was defending the Arab world from Persian influence, how he saw himself as a wall between East and West. But behind those patriotic words, a deeper truth was hidden, one that sounded almost like regret. Soft piano note. I saw boys with rifles taller than them. I saw mothers waiting for sons who never came back. I told myself they died for Iraq, but at night when the wind carried the cries across the desert, I asked if Iraq still knew my name. Tikrit, the land of dust, memory, and ghosts. Years had passed since the fall. The world had moved on, or at least pretended to. Iraq had new leaders, new promises, and new wounds. But for the people who still lived among the cracked walls and burned-out palaces, the shadow of Saddam Hussein never truly left. Every night, the wind carried stories. Children whispered them to each other, that beneath the broken soil, beneath the rubble of palaces, something still breathed. It began as superstition, then it became rumor, and soon, it became obsession. One man could not let go. His name was Khalid al-Mufti, a former engineer who once worked for the Ministry of Defense during Saddam's rule. He had designed tunnels, bunkers, and air filtration systems for the regime. When the war ended, he disappeared into anonymity, a man trying to forget what he had built. But in 2011, he returned to Tikrit, not as an engineer, but as a pilgrim, chasing ghosts. Khalid had seen something in an old American documentary, a blurred photo of the map recovered from Saddam's hiding place, and he recognized something the world had missed. On the bottom corner of that map, drawn faintly in pencil, was a symbol, a triangle with 3 dots. It wasn't a mark of geography. It was a code, a signature used only by Saddam's personal engineering unit, Project Qiyamah. In Arabic, Qiyamah means the resurrection, and just like that, Khalid's old nightmares returned. He knew the stories were true. The Chamber of Resurrection did exist, and he had helped design it. Under the cover of night, Khalid returned to the outskirts of Tikrit, to what remained of the Al-Dur compound, the very same area where Saddam was captured. He found the earth cracked from bombings, the trees dead, the walls eroded, but when he reached the northern edge of the ruins, he found something strange. A mound of soil that looked unnatural, like it had been filled recently, not decades ago. With trembling hands, he began to dig. Hours passed. The moon moved behind clouds. Then, a metallic thud. He brushed the dirt away. A rusted hatch welded shut. Khalid froze. This was it. The entrance to what he once built, then tried to forget. He lit his torch and began cutting through the seal. The sound echoed across the night, sharp, metallic screams. When he finally forced the hatch open, a breath of ancient air escaped, hot, dry, and heavy, like the breath of a tomb. He climbed down. The tunnel stretched for meters, walls of reinforced steel, lined with fading Arabic inscriptions. The deeper he went, the colder it became. And then, he reached a door. On it, engraved in gold letters, were the words, "Man builds empires. God buries them." Khalid's light trembled. He pushed the door open. Inside was a small chamber, circular, silent, untouched. The floor was covered in sand. In the center stood a glass case shattered from age, and beside it an old projector. He brushed the dust from it, and found a single reel still inside. A label, barely legible, Project Qiyamah, Final Archive. He turned the handle. The machine groaned, and then light flickered across the wall. Images danced through the dust. Old footage, shaky and grainy. Saddam Hussein standing in front of a flag, surrounded by his inner circle. But this was no public address. His tone was different, quieter, almost reflective. "I built Iraq to stand forever," he said. "But forever is a word that dies with the man who speaks it." The camera trembled as he walked closer, his face filling the frame. "If you are watching this," he said, "then I have fallen. And if I have fallen, it means betrayal has won." He paused, his eyes cold, resolute. "But I have left something behind. Something to remind the world that truth does not belong to the victors." The footage cut to images of secret meetings. Men in suits, foreign faces, handshakes in dimly lit rooms. There were documents stamped with symbols of nations that had once denounced him. And then, a voice off camera said, "Sir, should this ever be released?" Saddam replied, "Not by me, not by my sons, but by the earth itself. When the dust settles, the truth will rise." Khalid's hands shook. He rewound the tape, replayed the words again and again. The meaning was clear. Saddam had created a message for the future, a time capsule of defiance, a confession wrapped in prophecy. But what Khalid did not notice, or as he stood mesmerized by the film, was the faint clicking sound behind him, something mechanical. He turned. The door he'd entered through had started to close on its own. He rushed toward it, but it slammed shut. The air vents hissed to life. The room grew colder. A voice echoed from a speaker hidden in the wall, an old recording distorted by time. "You were not meant to return." Khalid's flashlight flickered. The voice spoke again. "Those who seek the truth beneath the soil must be ready to join it." Panic surged through him. He pounded on the door, shouted, but no sound escaped the chamber. The air grew thin. And then, the projector turned itself on again. Saddam's face returned to the screen, smiling faintly. "You see," the recording said, "even now, I command what remains." Then, silence. 2 days later, locals found the hatch open. The tools scattered, but Khalid was gone. Inside the chamber, the tape was missing. The only thing left was a single line carved into the wall, freshly scratched into the metal. It read, "The dust remembers." When the story reached Baghdad, it was dismissed as rumor. Another conspiracy, another ghost tale of a fallen tyrant. But one journalist, Layla Rahman, refused to let it die. She began investigating the legend of Project Qiyamah, interviewing former engineers, soldiers, and local villagers. Every story led her back to one truth. Saddam had been obsessed with the idea of legacy, not fame, not immortality. Legacy, as in control of memory. He believed that as long as people remembered his version of history, he would never truly die. And perhaps that was his final victory. Because even in death, the world couldn't stop talking about him. His name appeared in headlines, in speeches, in classrooms, in curses. Some called him a monster, others a patriot. But all remembered him. And somewhere, deep beneath Tikrit, a missing tape still waited in silence. Layla's investigation would soon lead her into the same tunnels Khalid entered. Deeper, darker, and more dangerous than she could ever imagine. Because the Chamber of Resurrection was not just a room. It was a message. One designed to awaken itself when forgotten. And when Layla finally unlocked its second door, she would discover what Saddam truly meant by "the truth sleeps where I last stood free." Soft desert wind, fading into silence. The year was 2013. 10 years had passed since Saddam's capture. Iraq had changed hands, changed leaders, changed flags. But the soil of Tikrit still whispered the same name. In Baghdad, journalist Layla Rahman stared at a faded photograph pinned above her desk, the one showing the old Al-Dor compound before it was bombed. Below it, a hand-drawn map, Khalid al-Mufti's map. His mysterious disappearance had been dismissed as madness by the government. But Layla saw it differently. Men don't vanish in silence, she thought. They vanish when they find something louder than the truth. And so, on a cold night in November, she packed her recorder, her camera, and a small flashlight, and set out for Tikrit, train clattering faintly in the distance. The journey north was slow. The roads were broken, the air heavy with the smell of oil and dust. At every checkpoint, she repeated the same story, that she was documenting the rebuilding of old Iraqi villages. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. For Tikrit itself was being rebuilt, but not from hope. From memory. When she arrived, she stayed with an old woman named Salma, whose husband had once worked as a guard in Saddam's palace. The woman's eyes carried the weight of 3 wars, her voice low and trembling. "You're looking for ghosts," she warned. Layla smiled softly. "Maybe the ghosts are looking for me." That night, she followed the path that Khalid had once taken, guided by his last notes and the rumor of a sealed hatch beyond the northern wall of the ruins. Owl hooting, wind shifting through reeds. It was past midnight when she reached the spot. The air smelled of metal and burnt sand. Beneath her boots, the earth sounded hollow. She cleared away debris, scraping through layers of dust until she saw it, the outline of steel. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. Then she lifted the hatch. The air that escaped was thick, ancient, and cold. She climbed down, echoing descent, metal rungs creaking. The tunnel below felt endless. Her flashlight cut through the dark, revealing walls etched with words, poems, slogans from the Ba'ath era. Long live the revolution. God nation, leader. Then she saw something that made her stop. A faint handprint on the wall. Fresh, as if someone had touched it only days ago. Her pulse quickened. At the tunnel's end stood a heavy door, the same door Khalid had found, the one with the golden inscription. But there was something new. Beside it, a second door, smaller, made of rusted bronze, half buried in dust. It had no handle, only a carved symbol, a triangle with 3 dots. Project Qiyamah. Layla knelt, brushed her fingers over the carving, and felt a click. The floor beneath her shifted slightly, a hidden latch. She hesitated, then pulled it. Stone grinding, air hissing open. A narrow passage appeared, leading into a darker space, colder than the first. The smell of oil and decay filled her lungs. At the end of the passage was another chamber, circular but larger than the first. The walls glimmered faintly under her light. They were covered in mirrors. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single object, a metal box. No lock, just engraved words. To those who rewrite history. She lifted the lid. Inside, there was a leather-bound notebook, a photograph of Saddam with his sons, and a flash drive wrapped in cloth. Electric hum builds. She pulled her laptop from her bag, connected the drive. The screen flickered. A single file appeared. No title, no date. She opened it. A video began to play. Grainy, but unmistakably real. Saddam sat alone at a wooden desk, his eyes fixed on the camera. Behind him, the Iraqi flag. The atmosphere was still, the lighting dim. His voice, when it came, was low and deliberate. "You will think you know my story. You will think you have seen my fall. But you do not yet know the price of what was hidden. History belongs to those who dare to tell it, not those who live it." He leaned forward. "To the ones who find this, know that what you call tyranny I called survival. What you call evil I called order. And what you call freedom will one day wear my face." Static crackles. The video glitched, then cut to another clip. Footage of bombed streets, dead soldiers, crying civilians. Then the words, "Every empire ends the same, in silence." Projector hum deepens into echo. Layla sat frozen. It wasn't confession. It was prophecy. And at the very end of the recording, a set of coordinates flashed across the screen. She copied them down quickly before the laptop shut off. When she looked back at the box, she noticed something else inside. A folded piece of paper. It read, "If they silence the living, let the dead speak." Below it, the same signature as the map, a triangle with 3 dots. Her hands trembled. She pocketed the drive, closed the box, and turned toward the tunnel exit. But the air changed. A faint vibration rippled through the floor. Deep, mechanical, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Deep rumble, metal shifting. The mirrors around her began to hum, reflecting distorted versions of her face. She reached the door, but it refused to open. Then, from a speaker hidden in the ceiling, a voice emerged, the same voice Khalid had heard, distorted, ancient, male. "You wanted the truth. Now you belong to it." Layla screamed, slammed her fists against the door. The sound echoed endlessly. Then, silence. Wind fades in slowly. Exterior desert sounds. Days later, soldiers found the hatch open again. Her car was parked nearby, her camera still recording. But Layla was gone. The only thing found in the tunnel was her notebook. And on its last page, written in hurried handwriting, were 5 words. "He never left this place.